questions? James?
Yeah, thanks very much. I found that a very stimulating talk. I was surprised that you thought there'd only been one paradigm shift within the history of medicine. It seemed that all sorts of things that seemed quite significant for thinking about the ways that medicine has changed, for example, the decline of the humoral theory, the rise of the germ theory of medicine. You didn't mention those at all, as if there's one change happened with the coming of Aristotle and nothing else happened for 2,500 years in medicine. It seems a surprising kind of condensation of the history.
Yeah, it's necessary, but we are now entering in a revolutionary logical change. Not the question of humor or tal. No, it's the way in which we are categorizing disease and medicine. This is the problem. I think this is another perspective of analysis of the history of medicine. It's not the change of specific data, humors, cells. No, it's the logical construction in which you are putting all this new data which appear all over the history.
Congratulations for this. Of course, I am professor of history of philosophy, so I am very happy to see that you start with Aristotle. And I agree in the end in your thesis, but only I want to say that this evolution of the medicine is an evolution of the things that are already in Aristotle. We come back to Aristotle himself in this new revolution, because Aristotle says, just in this part that you quoted, that not exist the illness, but exists the individual that have an illness. So this is my question, that we come back to Aristotle.
Thank you very much. Now, it's curious because Aristotle has been one of the big thinkers in the history of Western civilization. But in the last century, we have rediscovered Aristotle. And you are talking of the new Aristotle, not of the old and the classical way in which Aristotle was understood and interpreted. But really, you are right.
Dr. Planning.
It sounds like what you're describing is beyond a revolution in medicine, but a revolution in science in general, or the human sciences. Thank you. If the logical structure of entities is now redefined, then it's a much bigger revolution than in medicine. And in that respect, it connects, but if that is true, then it connects to other developments in thinking that are, for example, existentialism is all about saying that there is no human essence, but like each particular individual is, an existence all of itself. So,
right. I have been speaking about history of medicine, but the problem is bigger and is wider. And why? Because this old logic, the Aristotelian logic, was not only applied to medicine, but to science in general and to human culture. No? When began the change? The change began little by little in the 17th century and has been going little by little until now, when a British philosopher, Robert Bacon, published a book called Novum Organum in Latin. Organon was the title of the logical books of Aristotle. And the idea of Bacon was that was necessary to change the way in which we are applying logic to the analysis of science. And this was the beginning. No? This is the so-called experimental science, new science, which began in the 17th century or in the 16th with the Copernican revolution of Kuhn. But now is when, because this revolution of the 17th century was not in medicine, was in physics. And only now, in the 19th century, and especially in the 20th century, this revolution has entered in our field, no, in medicine.
Dr. Perlmutter.
Thank you very much. I think that was a terrific exposition. But I wonder about the use of the term paradigm shift in this context. Because in a certain sense, moving from the generic to the specific, from liver to hardened liver, for example, is just a matter of the precision of the measurement. And as we just heard from Lee Hood, and as we will hear throughout the day, our ability to make more and more precise measurements inevitably permits us to individualize our understanding of human disease. But that's really routine, ordinary science. That's not a paradigm shift. It simply is just improved measurement, isn't it?
I think you are right, but little by little we are changing the paradigm.
Excuse me.
In any case, you know that the theory of Thomas Kuhn is very spectacular,
right,
but has been criticized a lot.
Yeah.
I can't analyze here the post-Kuhnian approaches to the history of science, but I think something remains. I think we are changing through a new medicine in which breast cancer is not a species. There are a lot of different breast cancers.
But again, that's just the precision of the measurement.
That is precision.
So
Yes.
what you're talking about is, as the genus, there is the ductal epithelium of the breast, right? As the species, there is the proliferative abnormality of that ductal epithelium. And underneath that is that proliferative abnormality seen through the different subsets that we can now take, which is just the routine advance of science, I think.
Yeah.
Professor Boniolo.
I have the green light. So thanks a lot. I appreciate a lot of your coming back to Aristotle, the new Aristotle. I think it is a right thing to do. Just some comments from along the same line of Dr. Perlmutter. That is, it depends on the way in which you see history of science. I do not think that Einsteinian revolution was a real revolution, because before 1905 paper by Einstein, there was the 1902 paper by Poincaré on the same line. There was the end of 20th century papers by Hendrix Lorentz. And the same for contemporary precision medicine. That is, you cannot have precision medicine without the genome sequences. You cannot have genome sequences without 1943 paper by Watson and Crick. You cannot have the paper by Watson and Crick without Linus Pauling wonderful paper about sickle cell anemia and the protein disease. So it depends. It depends. If you see history of science from a large point of view, everything can be a revolution. And we are not in the, I think, in the right time to decide if what is going on in medicine is really a revolution. Maybe in 10, 15, maybe in 100 years, an historian of science can decide if really precision medicine or personalized medicine is a revolution in comparison with the so-called classical way. Now we are navigating through the history of science, and we are like sailors that we don't see the earth.
Sure.
We are in the sea.
Yeah, I agree with you. We are in the threshold, in the beginning. And therefore, what I present here is a hypothesis with some arguments testing the hypothesis, but the future will decide, of course.
Dr. Moazam. Thank you. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So I'm not sure that the distinction between revolution or no revolution is a qualitative distinction only. It may be that when things pile up so much quantitatively, it effectively changes the world. And so perhaps I might mediate between the two sides here to say, I don't know that there's a magic threshold that the concept of precision medicine or personalized medicine crosses that makes it a paradigm, but perhaps we can all agree that if it permeates through every part of medicine, we don't know if it will, but if it does, then at some point, the quantitative influence of that will make medicine unrecognizable. So maybe I don't care as much whether it is or isn't a paradigm shift. I do care whether the majority of medicine will look different, say, in 25 or 50 years. So anyway, I'm trying to make peace amongst the alternatives here.
Sure.
May I?
In philosophy, thank you. After Hegel, at the beginning of the 19th century, it was very frequent to say there are shifts from quantity to quality. There are moments in which the accumulation of quantity makes the appearance of a new quality different from the previous. And this is a revolution, in which appears something, of course, as a consequence of the accumulation of data, of course, but appear in a certain moment a novelty. And the question is if we are in this way or not.
Dr. Madam. Professor Digo, I'm not a philosopher. I'm a clinician. So that was a great lecture. I really enjoyed it, learned a great deal. I have a question for you. As you describe it, part of the shifts is occurring because, at least in, quote, the West, it's the individual who has become the social and the moral unit. But if you look around the world, that is still not necessarily it is in different kind of cultures and societies. So I'm kind of curious when I go to conferences and I participate in conferences like this, which part of the world are we talking about?
I know exclusively the history of the Western culture. Is my problem, and I can't speak about the things I don't know. It's a limitation of my mind.